recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website, and by choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given, I've lost where I am now, consent to being filmed and recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you've left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall, and members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphones when speaking. We'll move on. Item number 1, the appointment of substitutes. Do we have any, Mr. Bute?
Yeah, we have got a full house, no substitutes this evening, but I have had apologies from David Blake, Managing Director.
Thank you very much. Item number 2, the declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Lucy, Councillor Hodgson.
I've got, I'd better declare I'm a parish councillor for Wonder Villages. And I'm also a trustee of the Malvern Theatre, and yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Any others?
Lucy's mentioned the theatre, so I'm a director of the on Play Council.
Thank you. Any other declarations of interest? There being none, we move on. Item 3, public representations. I believe there are none. None? Great. Well, we're speeding through to item number 4, the minutes of our meeting on the 14th of December. And they are to be approved and signed. Can I ask, are they a true and accurate record of our meeting? Is that agreed? Okay, thank you very much. The minutes of the Personnel and General Purposes Subcommittee to receive the minutes of the meeting on the 15th of December 2021. Are those received? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. We move on to the first substantive item of the night, the draft budget and the draft Mtfp. Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This is the, I have to say, the 13th stage in the budget setting process for this year. Not quite the final stage, but whatever the outcome of the process, I feel confident that we've had every opportunity to include as many voices as possible and that people have had the chance to ask questions and contribute to the process. This stage of the process now is to collect in and consolidate the various the various proposals that have been forward by committees. So each of the proposals suggested here have been commented on and voted on and are brought through to Policy and Resources for consideration and then for onward inclusion into the recommendations to Council conclusion of the budget if those are accepted. Table 1 sets out all of the committee proposals that we've had to date. As you can see, there's a total of £412,000 worth of contributions from one form or another. One of them, which is under communities, which is the CAB Finance Advisor, there wasn't a formal report presented to that committee, so it wasn't a commitment at the committee, but a recommendation to bring that report through to Policy and Resources, and there are more details of that one set out in Annex A for consideration. There is also an additional item which is to be presented here tonight, as it wasn't stage, and that is £15,000 for a play worker. There are more details of that in respective set out in Annex. So the total in which those all amount to, as I say, is 412,000. The next question, of course, we're going to fund all of those. One option to us is to look at unallocated reserves, and having looked through the city plan reserves, identified some items where there is no actual assigned or committed expenditure against those lines. Each of them are projects which are previous allocations. There is still work going around CCTV, and we know that there's a policy requirement for helping a lot of work going on at the moment. But as things stand, there's no specific commitments in respect to those. So if members were so minded, we could look to reallocate some of those budgets to items. Another alternative is to make a contribution from our risk reserves. Now, those aren't allocated to any specific purpose, but are held as contingencies in the event that certain risks materialise. The substantial one of those is a business rates risk reserve, and Table 3 sets out status of that reserve at the moment. As you can see, it has currently got 7.3 million sitting in the reserve, but 4.8 of that is government money which is required to set deficits in the collection fund. So that's automatically going to be required. We have, under previous policies set by the Income Generation Committee, an income strategy which states that we need to have 1.4 million retained in that reserve. And this is to offset any potential that the government might introduce. That's now expected in 23-24, so we'll know at that stage how much of that. There were a number of commitments which were made in the November committees. Those are listed there, and they amount to 100,000. So we will move on to the following paper in the next item, which looks at the deficit for the budget report. That amounts to 558,000. Now that would leave, if we were to allocate all of those items, 366,000 on the risk reserve. The proposals above, as I mentioned, are 412,000, but two of those items could potentially be charged to other reserves. The city centre street scene enhancement proposal could be taken from City Delivery Fund this year, and the Worcester Food Bank item previously was taken from the hardship fund, and there is sufficient in that to meet that commitment too. So that, if we then add on 15,000 for the play worker, if that's accepted, and then there is a further item, which is an ongoing revenue item, which is set out in Table 4, the Environment Committee says £50,000 per year in respect of that. If we add those back on, then the total of the proposals in this report, which could be charged to the business rate reserves, is 352,000. Leaves us with a projected balance on them. So these are affordable from that reserve. This would require a transfer from the reserve into the city plan, because these are primarily city plan. And that would do, but it would leave us with a need to build up reserves for future potential shocks. Rate system. We'll have to. In addition to those items, committees have considered a number of items which are capital items and don't have a direct impact on this year's position, because the minimum revenue provision and interest on any borrowing would not be incurred until the following year in respect of those. They amount to £600,000. Further, more detailed reports will need to be considered, but the proposal here is that they are included in the capital programme as they stand. And I've done a quick calculation at the bottom there of 3.11, which we'll need to understand what's the best way to finance them when we come to those more detailed reports. But if we were simply to take out borrowing to cover all of those, then that would cost approximately 32,000 per annum as revenue. That gives a picture. As I say, we'll need to get more detailed reports on those, which we'll bring back to committee in due course. But happy to take any comments or questions or any further clarifications.
Thank you, Shane. There's a lot to take in there, so I'm sure there'll be some questions. Councillor Hodges first.
Really a point of clarification, because it is difficult. Am I right in believing that the money for the bids that are on page 2 could be taken from either Table 2 or Table 3? Or is it possible to take some from Table 2, say the 15 and the 109, because those are works that are already completed in the Guildhall energy improvements, and then some of the money from Table 3? Am I right in assuming that that's what's being said?
That's correct, yes, it could be taken from.
Yeah, another thing I wanted to speak on was the new paper at the back about the play worker. because I have been involved in the Play Council, become aware of the difficulties that the Play Council does experience at the moment in continuing their work. I'm not going to repeat what's actually in the paper. I think it presents the case for this 15,000 quite well, quite clearly. This would be a one-off grant just for 1 year while a review takes place, so that the City Council could look at how this service, this much-needed service for children's play, can be provided. So can I just sort of speak in support of that extra item? And I would hope that, that James has got his hand up because he's going to support it too.
Might seem like it was organised. So I'm going to take Councillor Stanley and then come back to Councillor Gregson.
Really good work in the communities they serve, and they've been through some difficult times of late, and I think it's only right and proper that we should support them in this way, so I'd be happy to go along with the proposal.
Thank you. And
members know that but the proposals listed in table 3 not chargeable to other reserves, which is 352 bottom. Where is that from? Because as I understood table 1, which I think is where it's from, that total there is only 300. Because if you take out the city delivery fund and the hardship fund, add on the 15, oh, 302. Is that right?
Missing piece. Add that one in as well. So you're nearly there. Very good. It was very close.
Well, they didn't tell you to turn the page over, you see. Just while I've got the floor, if you like, I just wondered, in relation to the housing for vulnerable tenants, I assume that money was identified as being of use and need at some point. And I just wondered if we could have some more information about what is covered by that, or what the plans for it were. I don't know if Lloyd Griffiths can help us with that, so that we understand what we may be foregoing.
Are you happy for me to respond?
either you or Lloyd, whoever feels most appropriate to.
Lloyd can contribute, but it goes back to the 2018-19 budget when we allocated the city money, and we set aside 2 elements around housing. One which was to help those in the housing sector in the market to get onto the housing ladder, and that was £500,000, and that one we subsequently reallocated to other work. This one was around trying to create opportunities for affordable properties and to get vulnerable tenants into housing. There were, I think, about 3 components of it, but it was primarily designed as a way of developing some priming money or doing some research or potentially helping out 1 or 2 individuals for relatively small amounts of money. And one of the substantial uses at the moment is to fund a piece of work with one of our providers, partners, isn't it? Can you elaborate more on that? What the original, there's a shared ownership piece of work that is going on, isn't there?
But just to clarify, it's been in there for 4 years. Lloyd.
I think I was just going to say, Chair, that through you, yes, Shane's described what that pot was used for, but I think we're now approaching property acquisitions on a case-by-case basis. So you're absolutely right, we haven't spent that money at all. There are avenues for us to pursue property opportunities. What we have used it for is for some around temporary accommodation, particularly working with like CCP, but very limited use of it.
Help, Adrian. I'm not seeing a huge number of hands, so okay, I'll take Lynn and then I'd like to say something on it. So Lynn first.
Yeah, I guess we weren't quite clear how the discussion across the whole, this whole report, because there is a lot of information here, figures to, to digest. But to take it through, with regard to the financial advisor for CAB, I mean, I thought that we'd agreed, voted it at communities. We didn't have the benefit of a report at communities, we just had a verbal discussion. I have to say, looking at, say, this is a tale of two Worcesters, that the level of need and the risks relying on benefits, struggling with debt, the increase in the number of people on universal credit. So I think absolutely, you know, the providing financial advice you know, without that advice, particularly what is coming more. But do we need to formally vote for paragraph?
I'd propose that unless asked, that we'll take them all on block, and we're including that. So I'm taking that as a proposal. So even though it's not been formally through committee technical sense, that we are proposing to put it in, do it all as one.
Thank you very much for the clarification. Got some other points. I mean, hear what's been said around housing tenants. Share of community. I would be extremely wary about rebadging set aside for housing. The things, housing issues, housing city. Too many people still in waiting lists in accommodation. We have it rented properties that are not, you know, this money, whilst it may not yet have been spent, the nature to create properties to deliver, I think, has a long life. Really don't think we should struggling with homelessness and greater risk coming forward, vulnerable tenants. Then the last, the table 5, the committee funding proposals. So the items from PED here, if I've understood it correctly, all to do with play, was that there is a draft. Is now the right time. good things, but if they don't fit, I think we need to look at them in context, recommendation. Well, it was a question about the play review strategy. And then the 311, the cost of borrowing, how is that likely to be affected by the recent increase rates and the risks of inflation?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In terms of the strategic play area assessment project, we are scheduled to bring a report back to PED committee which will be an initial report. And what we are seeing is that the proposals that we put forward in respect to play areas will feed into that process. I think this evening is about, broad allocations for play areas, but then the more detailed report around strategic play will come to PED committee for sort of final sign off. Those proposals and ideas will feed into a wider mix. So in effect, consultation is going to be the first part.
I've got James and then Lucy.
Yeah, thank you. Just like to make a couple of points, if I may. Firstly, the additional money that's allocated for CAB, absolutely right in my view that this should be on the table and hopefully will proceed agreement and approval. CAB do an enormous amount of really good work. We live in still very challenging times, and the figures that Councillor Dillon rightly alludes to draw attention to the fact that CAB is still a very important part of offering guidance and support to some people who are in need of that guidance and support. So on that particular point, I supported it on previous occasions when it's come to this committee and all that to my own, and I'm happy to do so again. I'd like to make a comment, if I may, about the capital proposal for Gorse Hill. You wouldn't be surprised that I'm very much in favour of this proposal. The number of people who live in the areas adjacent to the Mount that have remarked on the difficulties that they have experienced with antisocial behaviour, really numerous people wanted to have that conversation, and we can do more to secure it and make it a place that people want to visit and their dogs and generally experience a really significant part of the Worcester landscape, and I think embrace that opportunity. So on those 2 points and much else besides, I think there's a lot to look
Hodgson. Sorry.
Thank you for that. As far as Table 5 is concerned, both Land Off Cotswold Way and also the St Peter's, the BMX track and also the play equipment, yes, they will feed into the play strategy when we at PED have actually gone through it and agreed it, but also it's also members and their communities have also welcomed this, particularly around the Land Off Cotswold Way and also the BMX track, and they feel that, and the members, the individual members have also welcomed it as well. So it feels very right to actually be as part of the budget. And sorry, I haven't explained it at all well, so apologies.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I won't take up much of your time since the thunder's been stolen by Councillor Hodgson and Councillor Stanley, because those two areas in my ward, people are saying exactly the same. The lack of facilities for young people, certainly between the ages of 11 and 16, areas are lacking. So when they say, you know, we've got nothing to do, let's prove to them as a council that we are providing for them. That's why the proposal came forward. Thank you very much.
Councillor Hodges, and then Councillor Alcott, and then Councillor.
I wouldn't argue against BMX tracks and for play areas, play equipment anywhere in the city. But I did think that the play review was to look at the city as a whole, to identify areas of greatest need for play equipment, and then have some sort of grading scheme where we look at most in need and work through a list. I did speak against those three items at the PED committee. I felt they were premature to actually allocate money to them before we'd seen the play review, because that's the whole point of having it, so that we can actually find out where the greatest need. And I'm not, I'm not being in any way prejudiced here, because the land of Cotswold Way is in the ward that I represent. And I would love to see £100,000 allocated there, but it may not be the area of greatest need. And the other thing that came into my mind was, say the play review delivered, and the only money we have to spend is £100,000. Are we going to put it all into just one scheme? If this money was allocated pending the review, and these have been flagged up as requests for finance, but let's look at the review, because that seems to be the whole point of having the review. Let's look at what the review is telling us as a council that the city as a whole needs in terms of play facilities. Then I would feel much happier about it. I don't want to argue against money being put in, but you know, the whole point of the review is that we know where the greatest need is. And so it does seem strange to allocate definite sums of money before we've seen. I'd like to know what you think.
Well, it's awfully nice of you, Joe, to invite me to give you a view. But actually, I think these are great schemes, and I hope the committee will unanimously vote for them. Is my view. But particularly as they've been through the committee process, which I am a huge supporter of. But I'm sure you don't actually want my view too often. But Councillor Alcott might have a view, and then Councillor Riaz. So.
Thank you. Just referring to table 1, I note under communities there's reference to a cricket pitch at Northwick Park. I certainly do support more sports provision in the city, but I'm just slightly concerned that Councillor Stafford, Councillor Lawrence and myself as ward members for Claims are aware of this proposal. It's obviously been missed. So I do support a cricket pitch in Worcester in principle, but before it goes ahead at Norfolk Park, I would like full consultation with Councillor Stafford and myself, and if it isn't suitable, be located elsewhere in the city.
I'm going to take Councillor Stafford, if I may, now, because I suspect you may be on a similar vein, and then we'll come to Councillor Riaz.
Yeah, I just want to support what said. I think we need some board member information on. But while I'm speaking, I just want to do a very quick run through the Environment Committee, the environment proposals. two parts really. It's biodiversity and cleaning. On table one-off allocations, the 80k for the city centre street enhancement. That's carrying on some initiatives that we've been performing this year, which are well received. And on occasions, areas outside the city, much cleaner than they have been. A lot of compliments on the cleanliness of the city, far fewer complaints. So it's going to carry an element of that forward for a year, while a more sort of taken for the sort of the longer term sort of city centre cleaning. 10k for biodiversity upskilling is asked our officers to cut everything short. Brim and Bowling Green short, changing the request and asking a bit more considered and can help create and maintain habitats and not just everything short like we've Purdeswell landscaping is part final funding pledge for Purdeswell rewilding, which is planting thousands of trees and creating multiple. By asking for this funding now, we're getting an extra 45% from Natural England, so it's almost half price. Now, the only recurring cost we're asking for place working teams, and because with the headcount we're funded from off budget, but it's basically a permanent application we've requested. Current standards, which also all the resources to backfill other. And final allocations, the environmental thing, tech mower, which will help us roll out wildflower meadows across the city and maintain the success of St. Martin's Gate, roll out further charging points.
Thank you. Councillor Riaz.
Thank you, Chair. As regards to the item, I can only apologise for why relevant choice that the officers made in the committee or anybody else in this room. All the to put some context to it, in city we haven't got a municipal facility for hire. Cost of cricket. Clubs pay memberships, and changing landscape of cricket, moving to the quicker format, has meant new forms of cricket. As well as even shorter formats of T10, 8-ball cricket, which requires a tennis ball, PVC tape and wickets. So changing the nature of the game and trying to increase that activity. Participation has meant that people, abilities outside of the city, that obviously is a good thing. Costs and barriers to entry. Perfect sense. Back of success of the England cricket team and how well we are doing in the ability. Opportunity to income for the city council is not a relatively low cost. Hope that the wider community.
Pop back.
I've got an amendment. When to bring that.
Okay, do you want to go on then? What's your amendment? Let's have it.
It relates to table 5. So basically, it would effectively delete the first 3 items on table 5, place and economic development, and replace it with following. Allocate approximately 175,000 towards play area facilities, skateboard park, BMX pump track, as appropriate, to be decided following completion of the ongoing strategic review.
Your amendment. So this hasn't obviously been through committee. You're tabling that on the night. You're entitled to do so, but this isn't.
To do that.
You are, of course, entitled to do that.
Okay.
Is there a seconder for that? Hodges, I saw first. Okay. Does anybody wish to speak on that amendment?
Just to note that head committee did have a vote on it, carried the.
I mean, for me, I'll speak from my own experience. I think these are 3 strong proposals here that have been through the committee. They do identify locations. I mean, the idea that Warndon isn't an area of highest need when we've had a project called that for a number of years it seems frankly ludicrous to me. But members are entitled to their view if they don't believe that communities like that need this sort of investment. I think these have come forward through the committee process. I think they have support, and I hope that people will reject the amendment and vote for as approved by the committee. Councillor Stanley, and then Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, essentially, to repeat what I think I said at head, to imagine that the review, once it had come to its conclusions, would not conclude that Warndon was an area that desperately needed this level of investment, and particularly transforming a piece of land in a bright and imaginative way for a multitude of different uses. I would find that I'd be quite alarmed if that review didn't come to that conclusion. So I stand by the original proposals. I think they're excellent, and we should vote on those.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, this just seems to be pushing it down the road again. The items have been identified quite clearly. Talk about areas of, I mentioned already, those areas of bordering Battenhall. There are no facilities for that age group. So we listen to people, go out there, we talk to people. They tell us, who's wandering the streets and such like. Say, why are you doing this? They say, but nothing for us here. So we try and do something, and it appears to be pushed down the road. Heard about the play strategy and such like. Officer Griffiths has answered that question. I see no reason to include it in this paper tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen.
I'd like to speak in favour of the amendment. I really do support the review is going forward. It's only about 3 or 4 weeks. document exactly where it's for, we have the best area for this. Or park. That would come forward through the only a few good budget for play equipment. In favour of that. Best place.
Thank you. Councillor Hodges.
Thank you. I've heard no one against putting play facilities. We are not speaking against this. What we're saying is, what is the point of paying officers to conduct a review to give us some sort of awareness of where play facilities are? If we're going to allocate money, which might be all the money that's available, or we even it is premature at this point in time, definite sums of money, before we know what the play review is. And I can't see the point of having a play review. If you're going to say, well, no matter what the play review says, we're going to allocate those amounts. Councillor Stanley is possibly right when he says he can't imagine the review coming up other than a much needed facility in Warndon. But what is the point of having the review if we allocate definite sums of money before the review reports? There is no point in doing it if you're going to say, I know what the review is going to say, and this is where we put the money. We look at the review, look at where the facilities are most needed, and we allocate accordingly. Tells us. As we're only having to wait a short time before we actually. To me, it's just premature.
I've been told that the officer would like to come in on this, so I'm going to ask Lloyd because he might help the debate.
Chair, just for clarification on timing, the report that we're going to bring in March is basically the inspectory report. And we'll present members with the strategic play area assessment. So that will show where we have under provision certain city and what part of this. But the report really will look at what process we need to enter into to develop that more sort of strategic around what we need, where we need it. There's a big consultation process that sits behind that. What members are not going to get in March, the list of areas, types of play equipment a decision on. That will come a bit further up the line.
Fine. So it would not answer the question in March. So people are not on. Okay, fine, thank you. Councillor Gregson.
Thank you, and thank you to so it actually feels as though we're being asked to all the available council or play to specific names. The absence of an assessment process and support of the process and a full review and assessment. But if we commit all the money to these locations, there isn't going to be money for other locations which may be in greater need. Colleagues may recall that at June, when the available funding, the remaining funds last financial year, Prudence, were all fully spent, and I actually tried to get out of that allocation application for 50,000 for a skate park, youth play. June, I absolutely hear in terms of youth city, residents, Diglis, where these are real issues. I understand that officers had actually been looking at locations for a skate park. Preliminary work, or that's what I've been told, potentially at Cripplegate, but not had the opportunity forward. I don't think we should preempt it, specifying. I'm mindful of accessibility and wide. And sign up to these.
Thank you. I must correct you, though. You said all of the available money. At no point in this report does it say this is all of the available money. There may be more money. There could be further resources. Could be twice as much, 3 times as much. The funding source to make this is not identified. So the idea that this is the limited pot that might be available to support play is false. As it says here, the actual funding source for this is yet to be agreed as a capital item. So it would come forward with its own project plan for where the finance would come from. So there could be more monies for this. And I also find it highly unusual that you came forward with a proposal to promote a skate park for £50,000 in June, but when it comes forward, a similar proposal comes forward a few months later for one in a BMX track. A few months later, it's one of those classic cases with, we like the idea, but could somebody else please say it? We see it all the time. We've seen it on the bridge. We've seen it on the riverside. We've seen it on so many projects. The swimming pool, which was going to be a white elephant, and all the rest. When they're done and they're successful, people claim credit. I think we've had quite a big debate on that. So I'm going to pop that to a vote. The amendment. No, you don't. You've moved it and seconded it. It's not a debate in that sense. It now goes to the vote. Right, all those in favour of the amendment, please show. 6. Okay, those against? That is lost. I'll then, on that basis, put the unamended recommendation, which includes, for clarity, the play worker proposal and the CAB financial advisor, and all of the other things promoted by the committees, both revenue and capital, including place working, the 50,000 which is ongoing. Just for clarity, we're putting all of those, recommend those for that this report then goes forward to full council. I move that from the chair. Would that like to be seconded? Mitchell? Right. All those in favour of that, please show. All those against? Abstentions? 3. Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to a report that seems quite similar, the proposed budget and the Mtfs. This is the focus is more on the Mtfs, Shane, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that's correct. In particular, the setting of the council tax for this year, which is the key element. We need to make recommendations through to council in respect of that, and also in respect of the revenue budget. Just recommendation 1 is around the setting of tax, which is based on the budget requirement. That will equates to a rise of £5 for a bandy. That's what built into the budget for consideration. The second recommendation is just a little bit of housekeeping. At the previous committee, we set the council tax base, but the recommendation that we included wasn't quite completely up to date. All the items in the report were, so I'm just reporting that. The third recommendation is around the Treasury Management Strategy, and just to pause for that at the moment, you have this document on your desks, and there was a question raised in the previous item around PWLB rates, so I just want to draw members' attention to that in particular, which is table right at the back, an Appendix C, very colourful table with very blue and red lines on it. That shows historic PWLB rates, and what you can see from that is they are pretty volatile. Those big changes that you can see, which are the strong vertical lines in the middle, are due to where government has intervened, increased the PWLB rates dramatically and then decreased them again. Without those, you'd see it's largely a straight line basis. The table doesn't, PWLB rates don't tend to reflect changes in the Bank of England base rate. So although those interest rates are going up, that doesn't necessarily affect the PWLB rates. And there is a table also further in the report which sets out our advisors' expectations around PWLB rates for the next year or so, up until December 2024. And they are basically suggesting that they will be flat or even reducing over that time. So as things stand, we're reasonably comfortable with where we are with our borrowing profile in respect of our rates. If things do change, then we'll look to lock in our fixed rates and make sure that we protect that. So that Treasury strategy makes those statements and makes it clear that we are following a proper process in line with SIP for guidance and in line with our advisors' guidance. Recommendation 4 then proposes a transfer of £558,000 from the risk reserves to the 2020 revenue budget, and I'll comment on that a little bit more in a minute. And then recommendation 1.5, that the committee considers the proposals in the previous item, so I'll take it, we'll now build those into the budget for consideration. In respect of the key element, which is the transfer from reserves at paragraph 1.4, if I could take members. Paragraph 4.2, and the table that follows that, which is on page table 2, budget changes since 14th of December. So we considered most of the principles in the budget back at the December meeting, and at that stage, we had a proposed forecast contribution from reserves to make a balanced budget of 1.742 million. That is in the line right towards the bottom. Since then, the changes that have taken place, which are relevant to that, we were in the process of working through establishing the planning team in the structure that we want. There have been a number of changes to the voluntary redundancy exercise there, and we discussed this very briefly at the head committee. We've now had those proposals from officers, and that therefore has led to an increase of £75,000 per year. So that's built in at the top of it. And then there have been various minor adjustments. So those are the extra pressures in terms of the cost side we've had since December. And then on the income side, we received a settlement which was much more optimistic than we'd hoped. It's not quite right. We weren't very optimistic about the settlement, and it was better than we thought it was going to be. There was a new services grant. That's a one-off for this year. That was in fact more like £200,000, but part of that was to offset against the increase in national insurance contributions. Government said fund. The lower tier services grant we received last year. It's a recognition of the work that's done at lower tier level. That has continued for a further year. The new homes bonus, again, that was supposed to be the last year, but we received it this year, which was very good news for us because we've had a number of properties come on the market and come onto the list. Wigoran Park and a number of other places, properties back into use. And we also, post the settlement, received information that we would receive the £450,000. So that's able to be used to support salaries within the Housing Directorate. Released more of that than we. Altogether, that brings us down to a revised forecast, which is the final line in that table of 550. That is the proposed impact on the budget. Balanced budget. In the light of the previous item, that will need to be increased to allow for the 50,000 ongoing revenue item. But that's already allowed for in the previous table in terms of the overall position. Now that does raise a question, well, what about the ongoing position, the medium-term financial plan going forward? And as you can see at the bottom of that table, although the take from 22-23 at 558 is lower than previous years, the future years are still very high. We're looking at a financing gap of 2.196 million going forward, and that continues to increase. There was, however, within the settlement, a commitment from government to maintain core spending power. Now, what that means is that the government takes a number of items which it thinks local authorities need in order to deliver core services. And there were a number of things in the settlement which indicated that they were fulfilling that promise. Therefore, if we can expect to receive those items which are received in this settlement going forward so as to maintain our core spending power, then we could be reasonably comfortable in building those into the future. If we do that, table 3 shows that suggestion. I haven't allowed for any housing support grant going forward. We could reasonably take some of that going forward as well, which would bring the gap down to around about 1 million. Now the item, paragraph 4.5, recognises 2 very important areas where we are expecting to see significant efficiencies in the coming year. The revenues and benefit services being brought back in-house and underlying data. Confident there will be efficiency. We have an improving position with regard to the pension. So by the time we get to this time next year, we'll have some clarity about those and we'll be able to see going forward. On the downside, in terms of the risks, built within the core spending power is a withdrawal for business rates of 2.6 or 2.8 million, whereas in Appendix 1, where we can see the amount that we allow for business rates, we are currently allowing 3.7 million, partly to do with differences in what comes through grants, but also in terms of what growth we've achieved within the city in terms of our business. Business rates reset is due for next year, and that has the potential to reduce that growth and take 8 million. Why it's essential that we keep 1.4 million in our business rates risk reserve to mitigate. So I know there's a lot there in terms of the ins and outs. I thought it's important to state that because we need to show that we have a progressive approach which would take us back into a long. Do that. I think it's true we will still need some income and efficiency work to do next year, but that will. Yeah. So I think it's affordable. The overall budget position shows that we can set a balanced budget, that we still have sufficient reserves to meet our costs. And of course, on our underlying principle is that we retain 1. So we are, I think I'm content to recommend the budget as it stands to members, but I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
Thank you, Shane. There's a number of key issues. I'm going to take Mel this time. Councillor Olcott and then
I would just like to thank Shane and for the incredible amount of hard work that goes into a budget. And being from a finance background and not at Shane's level, I fully appreciate. But and it is completely outside of this output comment on how ridiculous national government can be sometimes. Because not long ago we received in the headlines, Liz Truss flew by private jet to Australia at a cost of £500,000.
I won't ask Shane to comment on that. Slightly outside his remit and ours and mine, but Councillor Gregson.
Thanks very much, Shane. I wondered if you could just clarify a couple of things. One, on table 2, the flexible housing grant transferred, same figure as not the same thing, are
So this is additional funding which was awarded by government.
Sometimes it just seems such a coincidence these things work out to be the same. And the other thing I was going to ask was about the planning resource. I couldn't totally understand why there was an estimated 75,000 increase on these posts. Because as I understood it, we're filling vacancies, so it should have already been in the Mtfp, and not. It's just the fact they wouldn't have been used because of the vacancies. And the second one is, even if that's all fine and above board, why is it 75 each year? That doesn't seem to be taking into account any kind of incremental rise or anything else like that over that period. Whereas I would have expected it to have gone up to your 100,000 per day, certainly by 2020.
Others may be better placed to comment in terms of the overall position with the planning department. It is partly a case of posts which stand vacant within the establishment but have been deleted from the budget through the restructuring process, so they're now being refilled, and also in terms of some changes to grades and so on. The reason that it remains at 75,000 throughout is because we recognise increases in increments and inflation elsewhere within the budget line, so they will be added in another.
That being so, what steps are being taken now or proposed to be taken imminently with regard to any new income and efficiency work, given that we could be looking at $2 million deficit, hopefully.
We have, just part of our normal cycle is that we get together as a senior management team in mid-February, so that will happen in the next week or so, and start to work out what our plans are for the coming year. Those form part of the set of priorities which we'll then discuss with the leadership group and inform members through the committee process. And as part of that work, we'll be looking to say, well, if our priorities are changing, what elements of our organisation can we look at in terms of efficiencies? What areas we might look at in terms of increased income? Obviously, there are those items such as the revenues and benefits change. We've done this a couple of times in the past, things like the place partnership, which we brought back in-house and making some savings as a result of that. Similarly, with restructuring customer services, which led to us. So we'll be looking to see what steps we might take in other areas of the business to see in income. So a new income and efficiency plan will be brought forward as part of next year in the autumn.
Well, Councillor Mitchell.
It's been a difficult year. Thank you, whoever turned that on for me. It's been a difficult year, and it's almost quite remarkable that we come out at the end of it, having been through 2 years of COVID, with a balanced budget, over £40 million to spend on capital programmes across the city, and delivering on things like new parks and play areas, etc. So officers have worked some wonders with the numbers, and I congratulate for it. Thank you.
Government, great difficulty in levels of, very limited levels of certainty. And I think it looks at recalculating and then looking at what's coming down the line, what the news release is, and there have been some really painful processes delivering. Thanks. Grateful to those that have delivered it. I suppose a word of caution, giving away, spending some of those too soon. Considerable risk and uncertainty. I want to just ask a question with regard to 8. That the county council no longer requires libraries. Fair to say it's unusual of the county look for sources of funding, what's behind that, and some assurance that library services in the city are good, because those are incredibly important communities. So if I can ask a question about that. Yeah, I mean, the uncertainty and the level of assurances, and you do a fabulous job. It's a very difficult economic situation.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, in respect of paragraph 2.18, the position with regard to that is that the support for the libraries is ongoing. It's just that for the 2 years to date, the library has, the county has been able to use other forms of funding for the element which the City Council was due those 2 years funds. And that has helped us out, but there's been no change in the agreement as things stand. They're still there in the budget at the moment, but it's an ongoing discussion as to. Matter for continued discussion.
Okay, I guess I wanted to say well done to, well, firstly to officers for the team and the whole team for the management team for pulling this together. I also wanted to say thank you to the government. I didn't expect other colleagues necessarily to want to do this, but last year the government gave us an enormous amount of money to support our work during COVID, a level that I didn't think we'd get, and I doubt very much anybody thought we would get. This year, our grant settlement, our out, is substantially, it's probably the best settlement I think we've had in 10 years. There's much more money than we thought we would, and I think there's some really good work being done by the LGA and by the District Councils Network and by other sector bodies who are making the case, and this isn't a party political point, but it's a sector point that district councils face particular pressures. Everybody knows that social care is a pressure upon social care authorities, but there are pressures that district councils face too, and the government has recognised that in the lower tier service grant, and in some of the commitments they've made, the new services grant. I was also pleased to see that there's money to meet the additional burdens that we are faced with, and that the government has announced this year that in addition to the £150 that people are going to get off their energy bills, that there will be additional monies for us. I've read there will be additional monies to make sure we're able to fund that. And I think whatever colour the government of the day might be, I think when they ask local government to do something, they need to recognise that they need to fund it too. They need to fund it properly, and I'm very pleased that the government has done that. The new homes bonus was a complete unexpected bonus for us this year. We didn't know it was going to continue, nearly £700,000. All of that puts us, nearly £1 million better off, and it has enabled us to do some of the things that we all want to do on this authority. So I'm not trying to make an overly partisan point, but it is good to see local government as a whole being recognised for the contribution we make to making the system work. So I'm pleased with that. I'm also pleased that I think the £5 increase in our element of the council tax is an affordable element. We are asking people to pay. We are keeping our bits of the bargain as low as possible. Clearly, there is a worry about inflation and inflationary pressures in the system. I note the pay settlements are still not settled for this year, and whether 2% is a realistic figure for next year, for instance, given the rate of inflation, remains to be seen. So we need to obviously keep an eye on those. But I think this is a sound council, well run, and it is enabling us to do some interesting and exciting things. So I'm happy to propose the Mtfp from the chair. Anybody else wishes to second that? Councillor Mitchell. If there are no other speakers, can we vote on recommending this to council? All those in favour? I don't think, Lynn, were you indicating as well? No, it was just Julian said it was unanimous. Okay. So, those against? Lynn, okay, that's fine. Okay. No. Those against? Yes, thank you. I didn't expect that, Chris, but never mind. Okay, we'll move on to item 8, fees and charges. Councillor Mackay, you're chairman of Income Gen subgroup. Would you like to say anything as this has been through your committee?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just happy to propose the paper as it stands. As you say, it has gone through the committee, and if memory serves correct, the fees and charges were on, and I believe there was a unanimous agreement. They were sustained.
Does the Vice Chair want to say anything? No? Happy to support, okay. Shane, would you like to say anything other than it's been moved and seconded?
Can I return the compliment and thank them?
Any other comments on fees and charges? If not, can we vote to recommend its adoption by full council? All those in favour? That is a unanimous. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Item number 9, the Local Government Boundary Commission for England's electoral review. Sean, I guess this is you.
Chair. Members will recall from our meeting in December that the first decision gateway for our council is in February. So under the Local Government Boundary Commission work, there are a number of points and issues. The first one is upon us. This first decision relates to the size of the council, the number of councils. Boundary Commission invites the council to make a template document that we are required to meet. Having shared the template draft, and that's attached. The report notes what the Commission is inviting the council to do, not really explore ratios and metrics so much. That work is in hand. There are a number of data sets we provided to the Commission for this submission, but the purpose of this submission document is to look instead about our arguments for governance. How do we consider our size, or a different number, will deliver strategic leadership, accountability? So addressing the questions set out, feedback that I've had from the draft submission proposes that this council similar number, 35, possibly with the option of increasing to be divisible by 3. But that in addition, if the Boundary Commission were greater size, then slightly larger increase in number, recognising 35, 36 preference. So those are officers' assessments based on the feedback I've had. But naturally, this is ultimately it's a matter for the Boundary. The other point to note is frequency. So whether we clarify that those are the only special council meeting.
Purposes of tonight's report is to invite you to draft submission so that we can present a
I'm very happy with what it says currently. I think broadly, personally, I think council about right. We've had either 36 or 35 members for 40 years. Certainly this cycle of 35, and I think the previous cycle was 36. So it's been that size for a very long time. I suspect since 1974, when I think other group leaders have indicated a support for that. Not seeing any. I'll now come in. Yes.
Yeah, just to confirm that, I think 35.
But there's a huge amount. Very much. Cathedral ward councillors. Where the predicted growth, some of the growth in electorate predicted. Of varying quality, but a journey to go to work.
Okay, if that is without. Oh, Steve. Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a very, very clear report, well received by members. I think for me it's summed up in almost in one short paragraph on page 44, where it says no governance or capacity issues raised by any inspector or government body. Instead, the LGA peer review process has recently been praised by the council's organisation, which really does sum it up in. So.
Okay, I'm not seeing any others. So can I propose from the chair that we accept this as written and propose it goes to full council? Our endorsement. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. We'll move on then to Purdeswell Leisure Centre.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Chair, we'll spend a couple of minutes just going over 7 or 8 points. So this report intends to advise members of the revised programme of works to replace the floor tiles. And the revision has come about through further work that's been undertaken with our procured contractor and specialist project supporting the council. Just to remind members, the report doesn't revisit the original decision taken to replace the floor tiles. Taken what the report is seeking, the approval of additional funding. Members will have noted in the report that the key change to the programme is the length of the pool closure, moving from 3 weeks to 12 weeks. And challenged robustly, and we have reached a point for that, exposing us to undue risks, especially the risk of overrun. I think as officers, we're absolutely saying that we need to do this once, and we can't revisit. Say engaging a contractor and having the benefit of a specialist consultant is that we're not fully understood. The original programme was put together. There are a number of ancillary pieces of work. It sounds a bit obvious now, but reheating the pool, chemically rebalancing it, industrial deep clean, reported paragraph is further information. The increase in cost share really driven by three factors. The original scheme costs were put together in January 21. Since then, members will the average price of material costs went up by 25%, so that's been a huge driver. Obviously, the increased length of the programme means there's more labour costs. And positively, but obviously having an impact on the cost, length of time closed means that the loss of the Communities Committee, polarity of the pool, the children's swimming pool. Just to reiterate, officers of the council, along with consultancy support, have absolutely scrutinised the program. We are satisfied. The pool closure will take place from the 20th of June and the 11th of September. And there are three main reasons for choosing that time of year. Summer is generally one of the quietest demand periods for swimming. We also wanted to avoid the sort of New Year, late winter period where there are a number of galas. And we also didn't want to impact the return of members after that, or those having joined us with the ship. All in that summer period. In terms of mitigating the impact on swimmers, we have carried out the following. So members have the option to freeze their membership for the closure period at no cost to them. Freedom members have their upgraded to provide access to all Freedom leisure facilities. 7 facilities in total. We're continuing to work hard to source local and neighbouring pool availability. Or bits of work that are proving really positive. To sort of leisure facilities outside of the city. There's also positive conversations that are ongoing with two. Further information will be up. We've also learned about the term land swimming this week. Freedom are going to put on swimming specific fitness classes. There is something called land swimming. So they'll be looking to provide that within the leisure centre. Just a reminder that all other facilities are Purdeswell. Just to focus on the cost share, as part of the previous report, a capital allocation of £182,000. Report now seeks a further £141,000. And this report asks committee to recommend to council. In respect of the loss of income claim, originally this committee approved £120,000. This report now seeks a further £200,000. At that point, Chair, again, just to clarify where we fund the loss. There is a change what's published in the report.
Yeah, through you, Chair, just to clarify the report in the financial implications section. From continuing amount, we restate that there is sufficient funding left within the income.
Okay, well, we'll open it up to questions. For Stephen first, then Councillor Ria. Councillor Stephen first.
Thank you very much. Group leaders and from officers on occasions about that definitely has to be done. There's various briefings. Quality of the surfaces. Better. Purposes of the committee. Share those assurances in.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Steve. Yeah, just to speak very simply, I suppose, first of all, without too technical. So the type of tile that we are, a different style, has extra traction built in. So in my simple terms, it's got a dimple on it. It feels like sandpaper, whereas the previous style, albeit it was absolutely satisfactory for that need, more aesthetic type of style. Due diligence has been carried out. So like I say, we have a on board who has this type of facility, locally and regionally. We have an expert, so consultancy support as well. We sent officers out to talk to other providers, schools. We've actually seen report from quite a local facility. This type of tile could be local for 30 years plus. So where we are at the moment as officers, we have as much assurance, I think, as we need.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, the test of swimming, obviously, waiting on the way. So I want to make a wider point about swimming pools. In terms of that, and part of me thinks that whether we built a swimming pool big enough, whether we, knowing what we know now, and in hindsight, the amount of demand that that swimming pool goes to, I mean, credit to this council, but actually we built it. But moving on in terms of this actual situation with the tiles, obviously the impact is huge in terms of impact on swimming, and in terms of that, I mean, I really want assurances from officers that if they do not stick to time, that we will be able to claw some money back from them. That there will be penalty charges imposed on the contractor. They do not meet that deadline. Absolutely crucial that it's delivered on time and it's delivered right first time. We cannot afford any slip-ups, pardon the pun, in being able to deliver this, because the impact will be huge, not only on the health and well-being of our reputation.
Councillor Riaz certainly doesn't want any more slip-ups. And on this item, we can all agree. So yeah, Lloyd, can you help? Sorry.
What I would confirm is, firstly, the contractor understands the absolute priority that this project establish that good relationship. Gone before. The contractor has good knowledge of the site, so that's a really good start. Then in terms of actually then more mechanistically, the form of contract prioritises delivery against time. ACT form of contract that gives.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Quite agree, this must go ahead. Got to get it done. Just a very, very quick practical question. At paragraph 2.7, as during the period the wet side changing rooms are closed, the dry side changing rooms will service the pool users. Tiles in that area, are they okay for that?
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, the blue matting that the Purdeswell Leisure Centre recently that are down at the moment, provided an they will form a pathway from dry side changing room.
Yeah, it's regrettable that there is an increased cost. It's regrettable that the pool has to close, but these works have to be done. Looking at paragraph 217, Freedom Leisure also appear to run the Malvern Splash. And there's comments in there about alternative pool providers during those summer months when the children are off school, when that's the time when they would like to be using their leisure time to do activities, to stay healthy. Is there any way that, that we could ease the travel to Malvern so they could use Splash or to presumably Evesham? Is there any way that we can help young children who would like to go swimming to be able to access swimming facilities in towns? Have we given any thought to that?
Yeah, again, through you, absolutely, we're aware of schemes, particularly during non-term times where organisations support young children to get to activity. And Warwick and the community team are having active conversations at the moment with organisations like the Community Trust as to see if we can support that. We still have quite a bit of conf money from Public Health that would absolutely help to that. So those conversations are live.
I'm very pleased to hear that.
And I was going to actually kind of draw attention to I mean, situation with the tiles of money and closure is not that. I know, I'm aware that officers are looking at alternative provision. Echo Roger's point, and I might not be able to give confidential conversations, but perhaps to say a little more around the potential for other pool within the city to be used. There are maybe some bits in terms of really important that don't lose. Any other point I wanted to make, this absolutely kind of illustrates
Chair, just on the first point, we've had conversations with several organisations, a range of there are some direct competitors where those conversations haven't been fruitful, but there are one or two sort of school-related where those conversations are continuing to prove positive. So as soon as we have a revised swimming schedule for the summer months, we will absolutely share that with all members, not just members relevant to committees. So, absolutely, and I think Councillor Denham makes a really good point. Swimming is hugely popular. You have real demand within Purdeswell sometimes, so if there is more we can do with local pool providers to expand that swimming offer.
Sorry, if there are no other points, then can I ask us to turn to the what we're being asked to A, note the report, 2, to approve the allocation of 320. It says from the risk reserve. Was that the right reserve in the end, or was it the income contingency reserve? The contingency reserve, and to recommend to council the allocation of additional 141,000 in order to fund the revised capital element of the project. Do I see all those in favour of that, please? Unanimous, thank you. We'll move on to item 11, the procurement of a security services contract. Who is doing this?
Thank you, Chair. This is a straightforward piece of business. We have reached the end of, in fact, some while ago, reached the end of our existing contract for security. This is by nature of a call-off contract where a variety of functions are carried out by Coma Security Services. We've reached a point where we need to re-let that contract. The current budget is around £58,000, sorry, 51,850, and over 3 years plus 2 additional. for agreement to let this contract without committee approval. So it's here tonight there is no to-be transfer of council staff involved, as it's
Any questions on this? Councillor Denham.
Just a question. You mentioned
yeah, I can assure members break that into now standard item in all.
With that, can I ask that we vote on that then? All those in favour of agreeing that? Again, as you know. Thank you. We move on to item 12, the Q3 financial monitoring report. Mr. Baldwin, you're in the hot seat. I assume you're here to deal with this one?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This report covers the year-end forecast at the end of 3. Pleased to confirm that the forecast deficit consistent with previous quarters. One that sets out what might seem to members that forecasting, help put that into context. Sets out detailed forecast at quarter. Bottom third column, the variance. Bottom under the salaries line. Resource. Further up, there are a number of smaller cost increases. These have been then offset by bottom. Report also includes biggest source of low budget.
Any questions for Mark on that? Okay. Can we note that? Asked to report. Agreed? That is agreed. Okay. The Q3 performance report.
Chair, this is our regular report for this stage of the year. We've seen improvement in a couple of areas. I'll just comment on the red ones, which will officers comment on some of the others. In terms of the stakeholder management strategy, this has been ongoing proposal for a while. And what we're trying to do now is to break that up into a wider consultation and engagement strategy. So we've put a project in place which will due to report in the autumn around how we improve our engagement across the board, including all of our stakeholders and stakeholders. Reset that one for September. In terms of on the right-hand side there, in terms of the red, the net spend market. We've seen improvement in terms of the new housing benefit claims, so that's one for a while. We've been looking to drive down some improvement in council tax. There work to put a new system in place, that should be well in place before we get. I don't know, Sean, whether you want to comment on the sickness absence.
Through you, Chair. The sickness absence. Reflect us moving slightly beyond our targeted. Fundamental underlying. NGP. Keeping an eye on them. Represent.
Thank you. Any questions on the report? Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at traineeships, which is also ragged red, it's a question really. The numbers are what the numbers are, but my question is, how many of our apprenticeships are degree apprenticeships, i.e. professional, such that whether it's in planning or something like that, and how many are different apprenticeships? That would make them more attractive.
Chair, predominantly our apprenticeships are what you would call a degree. Badged as that because it's but typically our apprenticeships fitted to apprenticeship or not.
I'm not seeing any other questions. Therefore, can I say we note this report? All those in favour? Item 14, the annual survey.
Thank you, Chair. This is our report. Every year we as part of the budget process, survey which looks at, asks questions around the budgets, helps us to inform the budget setting. The paper that we discussed earlier on included commentary around feedback from this survey and how that's had an impact. Free of compliance. There is a lot of detail in the appendix, but just in terms of picking out some key items and trends of interest, one of the things which is quite startling about this, that we've used the new city plan. So, for instance, the one which around sustaining our assets, and improving our assets, was changed to enhancing, sustaining our beautiful city for future generations. And as you can see from figure 2, that one had always traditionally been the lowest of the themes, the least important. And we had some workshops in which we talked about this with people. Feedback was that they didn't really understand. And the change this year, when that one has become the most important, Clearly, there is something here about how we word these things. One of the things that partly might be driving that slightly younger response rate this time, more interesting. And that follows through into table 2 when we see which of the projects. Many of these are related to areas around beautiful city and improving the look of the city. That is a theme which ran throughout these. One thing to note in terms of the least popular council, least popular isn't the right term. It's important to recognise that mostly when those that sort of don't know aware of what we're doing. So I think there is a message in putting work that we do and making sure people. Figure 3 shows clearly on page 109 that we need to be using our website more. That's where most people are finding out. Got to find ways. In overall terms, in respect of the satisfaction with council, that's dipped from the previous, higher than when we started this process. And that may be to do with some of the way that out the city. If you look at the service scores, table 4, it's quite noticeable. If you look at what was in 2020, which were the highest areas where people were domestic, around garden waste, rubbish collection, support for housing and homelessness, support for local businesses, all the things which were perhaps of concern to people, doors and dealing. 2021, it's so much more about the urban environment, parks and play, sports and leisure, environmental health, and the services context. The survey does tell us a bit about the way people are thinking. Interestingly, trade waste improved year on year, and we've made a number of changes. Cycling possible. Trying to focus it more. So that lends itself to thinking more about customers, how we trying to look at. And figures 5 and 6 show that improvements. Still some work to go. Final part of the highlights is just around. Every year we ask people where they'd like to spending increase. So I've mentioned we are putting more money into releasing. We are continuing to. It's interesting that increasing spending top is making us a safe city, whereas we've seen. Again, this might be about open and engagement in our community. Those are some of the highlights from the survey. We have, as I said, incorporated those. Try and understand better, more about. Questions about that?
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, Shane, thank you for the report. You're right, the Worcester City Council website is the standout of everything. It got more votes than anything else in terms of relative to the other options. Our website is clunky. I use it probably more than a lot of residents, and I still struggle to navigate my way through it. At times, it's not intuitive. I don't think it does much in terms of marketing, what we're doing, telling the story around what we're doing around the council. And I just think there's something, I've said this a couple of years on the trot now, I know I sound like an old record. We need to do something about it. And that probably is going to take a professional to come in and do something. Got to understand what we want to do to give them a brief, admittedly, but I'd really think the council, having seen this now, and I know COVID will have influenced that because people can't come and see people as much, but people are into those routines now, and everyone's got a smartphone. I think there's something we need to think about in the next year of how and what we're going to do to meet that clear combat indicator. We're lagging behind the time.
For you, Chair, that's certainly something I part of considerations around. The appendix gives more information around some aspects of that. In particular, recognises that web forms has been one of the developments. So a way of people letting us know what they want to do, making payments, engaging with us in all sorts of ways. Certainly, take that on board.
Hi, Chair. And one of the things, way beyond my computer ability, is getting a push ability. So rather than people, so when people visit our website, collecting that data, so I'm going to have to tick a box to say yes, so that then we can push information out to them. Anytime I go on a website to buy something, the next day I'm getting an advert somewhere telling me that, you know, there's a sale on. So I think that's something that would help us get messages out to people a lot easier. I don't know how you incorporate that in technically, but it's something we want to get a push capability.
Again, through you, Chair, one of the graphs in the appendix shows that the reasons people contact the primary, I'll make a request for a service and to find out information or more details about our service. We can get to a proactive approach where we're informing them about services. Come there.
Are we happy to note those the results? Is that agreed? Okay, I'm not aware of any other business. Therefore, would somebody like to recommend we move to private